What does a Hollywood icon do when he sits down for what is supposed to be an easy late-night interview, only to find himself ambushed on national TV? This is not another moment in a talk show. This is the tale of how a routine visit became a headline-making clash, and it involves none other than Samuel L. Jackson and Jimmy Kimmel. Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe and let us know what you think in the comments, because once you understand what actually went down, you'll never watch late-night interviews the same again. The evening started as it usually did in the vibrant Jimmy Kimmel live studio. The cameras were rolling, the crowd was charged, and Jimmy was going over his notes backstage. The guest of the evening? Samuel L. Jackson, the thespian with a voice that booms and a career that speaks volumes. The agenda was simple: plug Jackson's new film, exchange a couple of jokes, and conclude with the usual ribbing. But things took a dramatic turn after that script was ripped apart. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for the one and only Samuel L. Jackson. Kimmel grinned as the audience erupted into cheers. Jackson stepped onto the stage with his familiar charm, waved at the crowd, and sat down opposite the host. "Good to be here, Jimmy," Jackson said with a grin, rolling up his sleeves and straightening his suit. "Great to have you, Sam. Mind if I call you Sam?" Kimmel asked, leaning forward with an almost manic intensity. "Samuel works just as well," Jackson said, his voice flat but measured. That tiny correction may have been small, but it was the first fissure in what would prove to be very strained dialogue. And then Kimmel spun on quickly. "Before we discuss your movie," he told her, "there's something I wanted to ask you, something that's been on my mind." Jackson's eyebrows rose. This wasn't the typical foreplay. "What's that? You've been very vocal lately about Hollywood, about representation. Don't you think maybe you're being a little too confrontational?" The studio fell into stunned silence. Even the laughter lines could not bail out the abrupt change in vibe. Jackson glared back, his face going a fraction colder. "Aggressive? You'll have to be more precise," he replied coolly. "You know what I'm talking about, Samuel," Kimmel pushed. "All this griping about the way certain actors are treated differently. Is that just mudslinging?" And there it was, the turning point when everything shifted. What ensued wasn't merely a disagreement. It was a clash of values. One man telling it like it is to power, and another attempting to maintain grasp on a show careening off script. Jackson did not shout. He did not have to. His words, clear and forceful, spelled out decades of know-how, anger, and reality. He criticized the industry's shortcomings. He spoke up for his right to speak, and he asserted it. He was not there to be silenced. Within minutes, the tense mood changed to outright confrontation, and in a stunning twist, producers were summoned. Jackson, unmoved, was whisked away from the set. It was a moment unlike any the audience or Kimmel had previously witnessed, and it ignited a firestorm of dialogue that extended far past one episode. So what really happened that night? Was it an ambush, a power play, or simply a reckoning long overdue? Stay with us, because in the next segment, we'll break down the aftermath. How Hollywood responded, what Jackson said after the cameras stopped rolling, and why this moment matters more now than ever. But Jimmy wasn't done. He leaned in, his tone almost casual. Too casual for the subject he was stepping into. "Don't you think," he told her, "perhaps you're causing trouble where there needn't be any?" Samuel L. Jackson sat back in his chair. His jaw was clenched, eyes narrow. The tension was no longer latent. "Are you seriously asking me," Jackson spoke slowly, "if speaking out for equitable treatment inequality is causing trouble?" Kimmel shrugged, that amused smirk still flickering across his face. "Listen, I'm just saying, things are better now. Perhaps it's time to, you know, leave all that behind." And suddenly the room changed. You could feel the tension seep out of the crowd as the atmosphere grew heavy with tension. Jackson did not yell, but now there was steel in his voice. "Move on from what, Jimmy?" "From wanting talented individuals, no matter their background, to finally receive what they've worked for? To be noticed? Heard?" Kimmel laughed uncomfortably. "I believe you're creating mountains out of molehills. Hollywood's evolved. We don't have to keep flogging this dead horse." Dead horse? The term resonated. Jackson sat up straighter, his voice increasing, not in anger, but in sheer incredulity. Some members of the audience visibly shifted in their seats. Jimmy, are you telling me the battle for equal representation is a dead horse? Kimmel raised his hands, his voice still attempting to be innocent. I'm not looking to cause trouble, Sam. I just think perhaps you'd accomplish more if you worked more on your craft and less on politics. There was a silence of a long time. Jackson looked at him, not blinking, not jerking away. My craft and my principles, he insisted, have never been two different things, not for one day of my life. Then Kimmel went too far. But don't you think that actors should stick to their lane? Entertain people. Don't lecture them. The audience didn't gasp. It didn't need to. The silence said it all. Jackson's fingers dug into the arms of his chair. He leaned forward. Stay in my lane? He asked. I want to ask you something, Jimmy. When you make jokes at the expense of politicians every night, are you staying in your lane? Kimmel paused. That's different. That's comedy. No, Jackson replied firmly. That's not different. That's you exercising your platform to speak your truth. Just like I do. The only difference? You apparently believe your voice needs to be heard, but mine needs to be silenced. I never said that, Kimmel retorted, but the tension in his voice gave him away. You didn't have to say it, Jackson replied. You implied it. The moment you told me to shut my mouth about the things that impact people that look like me. The studio was completely silent now. Even the crew was frozen still. Cameras were still rolling, but no one was breathing. Kimmel attempted to bounce back. Samuel, I believe you're misunderstanding what I'm attempting to say here. Am I? Jackson glared at him. Because it sounds a whole lot like you invited me here, not to discuss my work, but to silence me on what concerns me. Kimmel's bravado was lost. His practiced charm had dissolved. He stuttered, that wasn't my intention. Jackson didn't blink. Then what was your intention, Jimmy? Because this doesn't feel like any typical interview I've done. Kimmel glanced off stage, silently begging his producers for help. But no one came. He was on his own, and Samuel L. Jackson wasn't about to let him off easy. You want to know what my intention was? Kimmel asked finally, his voice dropping to a sharper, less polished tone. Jimmy finally dropped the facade. My intention, he said, voice constricting now, was to have a truthful discussion with you about how you've been living lately. Samuel L. Jackson arched an eyebrow, his face sharpening. How I've been living? Jimmy, who do you think you are to govern how I live or speak? Kimmel didn't back down. I've been in this business long enough to know when someone's crossing lines, he said, the smile gone from his face. And lately, you've crossed a lot. The audience sat in stunned silence. No laughter, no polite applause. Just the sense that they were witnessing something raw and unfiltered. Jackson leaned in. His voice went low and deliberate, the kind of tone his movie fans would immediately recognize. A warning sign before the hurricane. Which lines have I crossed, Jimmy? Get specific. Kimmel stood up straight, walked tall again. He felt like he was in control. Well, for one thing, that speech during the awards last month, you pretty much raked half of Hollywood over the coals. I called out a business that still has a lot to learn, Jackson retorted. That's not crossing a line. That's being honest. But you made a lot of people uncomfortable, Kimmel prodded. Jackson's laugh was cold and dry. Good. People ought to be made uncomfortable when they're part of the problem. There it is, Kimmel snapped, gesturing at him. That attitude. You're some kind of moral authority. I behave as if I've been in this game for decades, know how it operates, and have the right to voice my opinion, Jackson retorted. Apparently that intimidates you. Kimmel shook his head, his own cool beginning to crack. It's not that I'm threatened. It's that the way you attack people who are genuinely trying to assist is wrong. Jackson leaned his head back, brow furrowed. Going after individuals? When have I ever gone after an individual actually doing the job? You're referring to directors and producers who can talk about change, but do very little about it. You're berating individuals who are trying their best, Kimmel said. Effort. Jackson's tone was raised, not in anger, but in fervent clarity. Jimmy, what does effort look like to you? Is it putting up a hashtag? Is it hiring people? Is it providing opportunities? Is it not press releases? Is it doing something? Kimmel wiped sweat from his brow. The lights were blinding, but the heat was more intense. Time has changed, he grumbled. You can't have everything in one night. Overnight, Jackson said, astonished. I've been in business for more than 30 years. How long are we going to have to wait for plain decency, Jimmy? 40, 50. Now visibly uneasy, Kimmel attempted to steer the discussion back into more comfortable territory. Perhaps you might be a little more statesmanlike about it. Diplomatic, Jackson repeated, as if the word irked him. Quieter, more acceptable. You mean I should be thankful for leftovers and smile while requesting more? That's not what I meant, Kimmel protested half-heartedly. But that's what you said. You simply don't have the courage to say it outright. Jackson moved in now, the intensity of his words unyielding. Tell me, Jimmy, when did you last use this platform to denounce inequality in Hollywood? Kimmel's mouth hung open, but there was nothing to say. I advocate for causes, he eventually managed. That's not what I inquired about, Jackson retorted, his voice firm. I asked when you used your show, this stage, to actually speak out on the absence of diversity in this industry. Kimmel glanced downward. I don't know if that's really my place, but it is your place to tell me to keep quiet about it? Jackson's voice sliced through, revealing the contradiction like a knife cutting through silence. The studio air thickened. Whispers ran through the crowd. A couple of heads turned towards the exits. It was felt by all now. This was not entertainment. This was confrontation, live and unfiltered. Struggling to recover, Kimmel put on a forced smile. Look, Samuel, I invited you here because I believe we could have a straight talk. Man to man. Jackson remained still for an instant, then slowly echoed the words. Man to man. Jimmy, man to man. You ambushed me. His tone was low, but with fire. You brought me onto this program under the guise of hyping my movie, but since the moment I took a seat, you've handled me like a problem to be solved, like some blowhard who needs put in his place. Kimmel's voice cracked with pressure. I never said you were a troublemaker. Jackson's gaze turned cold. You didn't have to. Your tone did. Your questions did. You couldn't even respect my name. You asked if it was all right to call me Sam after I told you Samuel. Then you jumped into criticizing my opinions rather than discussing the work I've come here to share. Kimmel was disintegrating. His well-rehearsed TV self was lost. I think you're being a bit oversensitive, he grumbled. The words resounded like a detonated mine. Jackson's hand came crashing down on the armrest with a sound that boomed across the set. Oversensitive? His voice boomed now. You think I'm oversensitive because I won't stand here and let you disrespect me in front of the whole nation? Kimmel held up his hands, backing off quickly. That's not what I meant. No, Jackson interrupted. You said just what you meant. You don't like me pushing back. You don't like me not sitting here smiling while you attempt to speak over me. Samuel, please, Kimmel begged, shooting a forlorn glance in the direction of his producers. Let's just calm it down. Jackson stood up, looming over him now. The room seemed to tense as if every molecule had locked up. Don't you dare tell me to dial it back. You opened your mouth and said it, Jimmy. You dictated the tone. You asked for fireworks, and now that they're exploding, you're freaking out because it's not the type of fire you can contain. The crowd was shocked. Some were leaning forward in shock. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Even the crew members, headsets on, were whispering frantically, speculating whether to cut to commercial or continue rolling cameras. Kimmel attempted to salvage what was left. I never tried to humiliate you. Jackson glared down at him. Then what do you call this, Jimmy? Having a guest on your program, not to promote their work, but to question their integrity and muffle their truth? Kimmel couldn't speak. His lips moved, but he remained silent. His normally expressive, animated face was pale and wan under the bright studio lights. Jackson waited a beat, looking down at him. The gravity of the moment bore in on him from every direction. You can't respond to it, can you? He said finally. Because you know deep down exactly what this is. He retreated a step, surveying the hushed gathering. This isn't a conversation. It's an effort to muzzle someone, to chasten a voice that unsettles you. That's not true, Kimmel breathed. Isn't it? Jackson retorted, voice booming. Then tell me something. Why did you not ask me a single question regarding the movie I came here to discuss? Why were the first words from your mouth concerning my so-called aggressive views? Tell me, Jackson insisted, staring down Kimmel, why you believe it's your responsibility to inform a grown man, a long-established actor with more years under his belt than most hosts have had shows, to stay in his lane. Kimmel's mouth moved, but no words emerged. The studio had fallen silent, except for the quiet whir of cameras continuing to roll, each one recording the gradual, public destruction of a late-night host who had misjudged his guest. Jackson didn't let up. His voice struck like a hammer, each word landing with deliberate force. You know what the real problem is here, Jimmy? The real problem is that you're comfortable with the status quo. You're fine with a world where people like me are expected to be grateful for whatever scraps were thrown, and silent about the opportunities we're denied. He took a slow step forward, his presence swelling with righteous fury. You're comfortable with inequality. As long as it doesn't touch you, Kimmel croaked, barely audible. I've never said anything like that. Jackson's stare burned through him. You didn't have to say it. Your actions scream it louder than words ever could. Tonight you brought me here, not as a respected colleague, not as a seasoned actor with years of work to talk about. No, you brought me here to lecture me, to dismiss me, to attempt to humiliate me before your audience, hoping I'd just sit here and take it. He started pacing now, his passion explosive, devouring the stage. The audience was paralyzed, enchanted, shaken. Now let me tell you something about respect, Jimmy, Jackson said, his tone slicing like glass. Respect isn't something you act out when the cameras are rolling. It's not something you dress up in for ratings. Respect means treating people like equals, not like problems to be solved or voices to be silenced. Kimmel attempted to salvage it. Samuel, I do have a lot of respect for you. I have always had a great deal of respect for your work. Jackson stopped halfway and spun around. My work? His voice was cold. You admire my work, but you do not admire my right to talk about the business I've spent my life doing? You admire my capacity to entertain you, but not my mind, not my experience, not my point of view? He held his silence just long enough for the quiet to bite. Kimmel's face went white. His producers edged toward the lip of the stage, wondering if they should step in, or whether it was already too late. That's not respect, Jimmy, Jackson went on. That's selective respect. Respect based on a condition. The type of respect which says, you're worth something, but only if you remain in the little box we constructed for you. He took a deep breath, and then suddenly his voice erupted again, overwhelming the studio with the impact of the truth. But the minute we leave that box, the minute we employ our platform to tell someone something outside your entertainment, then suddenly we're difficult, we're loud, we're a problem. Jackson halted mid-center stage. His very presence engulfed the room. And that's what you attempted to do tonight. You attempted to stuff me back into that box. You attempted to remind me of my place. He took one last step forward, looming over Kimmel. Well, let me remind you of something, Jimmy. I don't have a place. I have a career, I have a platform, and I have a voice. His voice fell into a seething growl, each word chosen. And I'll use all three, whichever way I see fit. I never meant to suggest, Kimmel started, his voice shaking, but Jackson interrupted him with a swift, sharp gesture. Jackson stood upright, taking up every inch of the stage, his voice now firm and unshakable. Don't insult my intelligence with more lies, Jimmy. We both know precisely what you meant to suggest. This was never ever going to be a courteous exchange. This was a stunt. You brought me here not to discuss my work, but to rip me apart. He surveyed the crowd, which had fallen totally silent, some viewers looking away uncomfortably, others mesmerized, feeling they were seeing something extraordinary. But here's what you didn't expect. You didn't expect me to refuse to play along. You didn't expect me to get up and call this out for what it is, a performance, a thinly veiled attempt to put me in my place. He stood over Kimmel's desk, his massive frame looming above him. Tonight, Jimmy, you had a choice. You might have had a real conversation. You might have asked good questions about my work, about the stories that matter to me, about the things I've learned in the business. But instead, Jackson's eyes grew tight. You chose mean-spiritedness. You chose to be small. You took your platform not to raise the stakes, but to belittle someone you obviously perceive as a threat to your vision for the world. Kimmel was clutching his note cards and shaking hands now. Samuel, please. Can we just, Jackson interrupted him curtly. Can we just, what? Just pretend this never happened and sweep this under the carpet? Go back to softball questions as you smile for the cameras and pretend like you respect me? He laughed, the tone bitter and cutting. No, Jimmy, we can't. You made your decision the minute you tried to make this stage a weapon. And now you don't get to write the script because it didn't happen the way you wanted. Kimmel stuttered. I made a mistake. Jackson nodded. You made a lot of mistakes. But the biggest one was in underestimating who you were dealing with. He adjusted his jacket, then turned intently towards the main camera, making eye contact with millions of viewers nationwide. To all those watching at home, listen up. This is what occurs when you stand up. When you refuse to ask for permission and instead demand change. When you reject the comfort of those who gain from injustice. He paused, allowing the gravity of his words to hit like a thunderclap. Folks like Jimmy will label you as angry, challenging, polarizing. They'll attempt to shame you into silence, inform you to be thankful, inform you to wait, inform you the system is already evolving. But the truth is this: equality is not something that is given to us. It is something we battle for. And justice is not bestowed upon us by the comfortable. It is attained by the relentless. Jackson gave one final glance at Kimmel, now slumped in his chair, clearly dripping with sweat, muttering nothing. So if standing up for what's right makes me too much for your stage, then maybe your stage was never big enough for the truth. Without another sentence, Jackson turned and left the set. His departure greeted not with applause, but with a speechless silence louder than an ovation. Jackson's words boomed throughout the studio. These aren't favors. These are rights. And rights are not begged for. They're fought for. The air in the room was charged with tension. No one stirred. Crew members were frozen. Producers were whispering desperately, not knowing whether to go to commercial or allow the moment to play out. And when you do fight for those rights, when you stand up, not just for yourself but for others, there will always be Jamies. People who attempt to gaslight you into silence, who make you feel like you're the problem, that you're the disruption, that telling the truth is more offensive than the injustice you're exposing. He completely turned towards Kimmel now, whose face was a combination of shame, incredulity, and terror. But here's the thing, Jimmy. I've been causing a ruckus my whole career, and I'm not going to give it up now. I've taken a stand for what's right when it wasn't popular, when it cost something. So what made you think I'd let you bully me? The audience hung in suspense. You brought me here tonight hoping that you could make an example of me, that you could establish something with your audience, that you could remind everyone that even I can be placed in my place. But the only example you made tonight is yourself. He moved forward, his voice deadly calm and low now. You taught all of us who were watching what conditional respect looks like, what tenuous tolerance looks like. You taught the world that your comfort is more important to you than someone else's dignity. Security had arrived stealthily at the periphery of the stage. Jackson had noticed them and was smiling, not because he was afraid, but because he knew them. And there it is. When you can't win the argument, when the truth becomes too loud, when your reputation's on the line, you call security, not because I'm a threat, but because I won't play along. He spoke to the guards, serene and unruffled. Gentlemen, I know you're just following your duties, and I'm going willingly, but let's have one thing clear. I'm not the issue here. I'm not violent. I'm not dangerous. I'm just a man who knows his value and won't be treated with disrespect. Jackson turned back to Kimmel for one last settling of accounts. Jimmy, this has been a lesson. For me, for you, for all of us watching. You showed us that there are still individuals in this business who handle successful professionals like children, who believe a talk show set grants them authority over people's reality. And you showed all of us watching that when somebody refuses to remain quiet in the face of that. There are repercussions. He smoothed out his jacket, gazed at the camera with quiet defiance. To anyone who is watching, remember this moment. Remember what it looks like when somebody attempts to silence a voice that they don't want to hear. And remember what it looks like when somebody doesn't back down. Your voice matters. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Without waiting for an indication, Jackson turned and walked off stage, security following him, not leading him. The silence in the studio was total. Jimmy Kimmel hunched alone at his desk, pale, stunned, his note cards meaningless in his trembling hands. For the first time ever, the man who made a career out of words had none to use. And the cameras, they continued to roll. What did you make of this showdown? Have you ever witnessed a guest take apart a host in such a way on live television? Let us know in the comments and subscribe for more authentic, gritty, and unvarnished tales of what actually goes down when Hollywood's masks are removed.